you have a little throat vanity with that fella, that poor guy. Felt so bad for him. I was like, oh my gosh. Imagine singing your own song out of your range. Oh my gosh. Hi everybody, thank you for coming to the kitchen. Thanks for being the people who are here. I'm Paisley Yankolovich, I'm your tour guide. Please keep all arms and hands inside the windows. No, there's always one. So, I have a story or two to share. I remember many years ago, and when you hear what I said, I think the door needs to be closed properly. Or see if there's a human behind it pushing it, but I think it just needs to be closed properly. Okay. Oh, that one stays open, and that one stays closed. There you go. Okay. Anyways, you'll realize how old this story is when you hear the punchline. But I was at a mall, and I saw some guys stealing bikes that were like, those that were like locked up in front of the mall. You ride your bike to the mall, and then you use your chain and they were just snipping those chains and stealing bikes. And I called the police, and it turns out several other people called the police too. So there was like a dozen of us there when the two ladies in uniform showed up. And what I thought was so interesting at the time was, and it's relevant to the story, it's not like the first thing that went through my head at the time, but it certainly went through my head rapidly during the time, was that the two police women were white, and all the people who called in the crime were white. And the two perpetrators that were stealing bikes were white. There were a lot of white people involved in what happened. And it couldn't have been that we were in a relatively affluent neighborhood, but I guess that's racist now to point that out. But what struck me as really interesting was I was the youngest person who had called the police that day. So everyone was, 5 to 15 years older than me. And there was so much agitation. They're like, are we gonna get a reward for this? Are we gonna have to testify? And they were really hassling the police officers that were just trying to get our names and our statements one at a time. But they were really aggressive, and they were mostly women. But the people were really aggressive, and they were like surrounding the police officers and really like talking over them and yelling at them. What are you going to do about this? You're just standing here. Aren't you going to go do something? Aren't you going to go after those guys? Why are you doing it? They were really aggressive. And as you know, the more nervous I get, the funnier I get. And I said, look, everybody calm down. If everyone behaves and gives their statement, you all get a free guest spot on Cagney and Lacey. Now you know how old this joke is, right? Because of the two lady officers. And they were like, and they started laughing, and everyone was quiet. They believed me. And I looked at the women and I said, God bless you guys. And one of them said to me, she said, we never hear that joke, you know that, right? And I said, they fell for it. And this is in front of the people. And they were all like, we're gonna get a prize, we're gonna get a prize. And after everything was done, one of the police officers called me over to them, and I said, I'm gonna get in trouble for the Cagney and Lacey thing, aren't I? And they said, no, we wanna thank you. They said, you really diffused a situation that was agitated and quickly getting out of control. And we were concerned we were going to have to call in other officers. I said, would it have been different if men had come out? And they said, absolutely. Absolutely. When we come out, people just scream at us the whole time, the entire time. They just yell at us and boss us around. men don't take us seriously, and the women are horrible to us. And one of them said, you know, you should consider a career in public speaking. And I said, I'm a minister. And they go, well, it really shows, because you know, you said something, it was really funny, it caught everyone off guard, and it calmed the whole situation around. And I go, no, you're gonna have like a mob, and then they find out they don't get our Cagney and Lacey. And they said, no problem, we're just telling them we're taking their numbers, they'll hear from our office. And then I waited and I said, is there any chance I can get on Cagney and Lacey? And for those who really want to fish the internet for me, I worked on Cagney and Lacey, so feel free. But it was priceless. It was priceless. It was priceless. And I walked away and I went, and this was, you know, 30 years ago or something. I walked away going, police officers in LA have a really tough job. How long ago was that? I want to tell another story about LA. I grew up miles away from where the Tate LaBianca murders took place, Charlie Manson. And so I always say I grew up in Manson country. And I remember at the mall with the bikes, hearing people grumble at these officers under the breath. The stuff they weren't saying is they were saying things like fucking pigs. Okay? This is stolen bikes at a mall, you know, and we were the people reporting it, and they were getting mad at the police officers and using the term pigs. And if you haven't read Helter, Skelter, if you haven't seen the movie, or if you haven't heard all the stories, Charlie Manson's plan was to have a series of racial hate crimes happen. That his people would go out and they would commit crimes, but then they would make it look like black people had done it. That was his plan. Because he wanted to start a nationwide race war. Because if the whites and the blacks started fighting each other, the police would step in, and there would be an opportunity to start killing police people. And this civil war that he would cause would bring about peace in America once and for all, because we wouldn't be under police rule, and we wouldn't have the uppity Negroes anymore. That was his plan, and he called it Helter Skelter. That's what Helter Skelter is, because the Helter Skelter would be all the madness and the chaos that was caused by Charlie Manson. People who profess to be Christian, in thus saying so, say they are a spiritual people who believe in spiritual things and spiritual entities. So, for me to say that there's a possibility, dear Christians, that Charlie Manson got his ideas from some other source other than his own acid-riddled brain, most Christians would believe that. I could bring up scriptures like in Ephesians where Paul says, you know, we don't battle flesh and blood, but we battle powers and principalities from another dimension. You know, so that the evil that men do is usually inspired by some dark evil force like Satan or a demon. And this is what Christians believe. This is what Christians believe. This is what Christians know to be true. So as bad as Manson was, or as bad as Hitler was, or as bad as Jeffrey Dahmer was, we're reasonably sure that they had help from some invisible dark higher power of some sort. So it's not a big hop, skip, and a jump to say that if the darkest force in the universe came up with the idea of Helter Skelter and it failed, it may resurface again sometime. My scripture references for tonight, because there has to be a scripture reference for what I'm saying tonight, or it's not official. But also, this really struck me as very interesting that in Matthew, Jesus said, "You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot." Christians who've been to church before, how many times have you heard that? A lot of times, millions, trillions of times. And the minister always says, okay, salt in Bible days was used for yell out stuff. What was it used for? Why was it so important?
Preserving meat.
For what?
Preserving meat.
Okay.
Hey, soldiers.
Okay. Anything else? Ed? Salt is
the earth.
It is traditionally, of course, used to flavor, to bring out the flavor in stuff, right? But it was also used as a disinfectant and a preservative. Now, I don't want to sound smart. I looked it up. I wanted to see what I could find if I looked it up, what other people said about it. Because I would have said it's used for flavor, but it was also used to cauterize wounds. You know, so it was put on wounds, and it was used to draw out impurities, and if it didn't have saltiness to it, it had no flavor, so it was useless to bring out the flavor, and it was useless to purify. So it just became stuff you throw on the dirt and call it a day. And salt, of course, mentioned again in Mark, Jesus says, everyone will be salted with fire. So now we're just talking about purification by the fire of the Holy Spirit of God, that we would be tried by fire. Salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? And then he says, this is very interesting, have salt among yourselves and be at peace with each other. And he's literally saying, fight your battles in God. Your battle is your flesh first and foremost, and be salted with fire, and fight your spiritual battles within God and amongst yourselves and amongst humanity. Have peace, meaning create peace. And in Colossians, Paul says the believers, he says their speech should be seasoned with salt. The stuff we say should be seasoned with salt. And I don't think that means that it's tasty. I think it means that it's been purified and cleansed and burned with that fire that is the salt that Jesus talked about. And he's saying that we're the salt at that point, and we're for the preservation of society. Remember, he said, you are the salt of the earth. He did say that. So if we're the salt, we're there for preservation. I think we like to be there to burn and sting people's wounds, because we like to see them bubble and stuff, and makes us feel like we're actually doing something. But that's why Paul admonishes that our speech be salted, cleansed, purified, to do some good, not to do damage. And I have been saying for the last 2 years that Christians are doing so much damage with their mouths, with what they're saying. They're doing so much damage now. Well, now everybody's like this. Everybody's like this, not just Christians anymore. When I started, Christians were the main offenders. And I've said this over and over again. We're always at fault. We're the keepers of the truth. We're the keepers of the light. And we set bad examples, and then other people follow suit. Because now, everybody's factioning off into their little groups, and they want nothing to do with the other group. And everybody's saying within their group, a time is coming where we're going to have to fight. More people have used the word civil war, that's 2 words, used the phrase civil war in the last 48 hours that has been used in America in that short period since the Civil War. How many times does a country have to say civil war before there's a civil war? How many times? How many times? Do we need to find out? Do we want to find out? If salt loses its flavor, it's not good for anything. If the Christian is not purified in God, if the Christian is not cleansed, if the Christian is not equipped to purify and cleanse in a way that preserves society, not kicks it when it's down, it is useless. And we are the voice of God to human beings on planet Earth. We're it. We are the mouthpiece for God on planet Earth. We are it. And if we are useless, what's going to happen? Well, I hate useless, and I hate lazy, and I hate lukewarm, and I hate all the things that are the opposite of passionate and excited and on fire and in love. But we have been passionate and excited and on fire and in love with hate all these years. We haven't just been passive. We've been really aggressive. All these years we've been really aggressive. Charlie Manson wanted to trick white people. And forgive me, white people in America are Christian, whether they're Christians or not. Okay, that's America. Okay? So, Charlie Manson wanted to trick young white people who thought they were Christians into believing that the blacks were getting out of control and needed to be subdued. So he wanted to create situations, not just the 2 that happened and then they got caught. He wanted to set a series of situations that would cause white people to think the blacks were out of control, and the black people to think they had to start fighting the whites, especially the cops. It's funny, if you saw that in a movie and it hadn't really happened in life, you'd go, that guy's an idiot. Remember Dr. Evil in Austin Powers? He was funny because he was so stupid. If I don't have $10,000 by the end of today, inflation, $10 million, you know. But, you know, it sounds like a spoof to say, I'm going to set off a race war. And I'm going to cause everybody to fight and kill each other. It's going to be all Helter, Skelter. And no one's going to know who started it because they're going to be too busy. The blacks are going to go after the whites, and the whites are going to go after the black, and everyone's going to get mad at the cops, and they're going to kill all the cops, and the government's going to come in and they're going to try to institute martial law, but they're not going to be able to because the people are going to band together, and we're going to wipe out the police, and we're going to wipe out the government, and this will be the new America. This is exactly what I'm hearing on Fox News, what I just said. This is word for word what I'm hearing all over the world, all over America right now, all over the world. Everybody's talking about us now. I like Charlie Manson. I've always liked Charlie Manson because everybody knows who he is. And the fact that I call him Charlie like he's my buddy, he's my buddy. He's been my buddy all along. He's been my boogeyman for years growing up. I'm terrified of home invasions. Terrified. Terrified. If I didn't have a dog, I'd have a gun. Terrified of it. You know, grew up with that happen. You can't even imagine what that's like. I was just born when Kennedy was assassinated. And I know for people that were old enough to understand what had happened, that was devastating to people to think that could happen. You know, so with what happened with the Tate LaBianca murders, it was the same thing. It was like, this is so scary. So scary. We all got burglar alarms. Everyone got a burglar alarm. Where I was, you know, rich white Los Angeles, we all got burglar alarms. You know, because the Mansons were coming for us. They were on the beach. They'll work their way back to us again. And here we are. Here we are. But I've always loved Charlie because he says things that can't be unsaid. And he said, you people need me because you need evil to point at so that you don't realize you're evil. And I am you. And there's nothing I've done that you won't do yourselves one day. Really scary stuff. At the end of the day, we need to be people of prayer, and we need to be people of service, and we need to be people of healing and restoration, and we need to be peacemakers. We have to have some way of diffusing situations. Unfortunately, the human being needs a catastrophic event to believe a catastrophic event will happen. That's usually what happens. And the problem is then it could be too late. Then it could simply be too late. Because sometimes catastrophic events are catastrophic. Too much happens that can be undone, and then everything is changed. I remember I was living in Los Angeles, and a fireman came to our condo complex, and he said, do you think you guys would like to have an earthquake awareness meeting? And he talked to me because he just ran into me first, and I happened to be on the board that month. And I said, I'll present it to the board. I think that would be really cool. And I go, do you give out stuff like, erasers or something, or pens or something? And he goes, I give out wet nappies, moist towelettes, in packets. And I go, I'm in, just as long as you give stuff out. I think I can get everybody in the building to go. And I presented it to the board, and they thought it was ridiculous. And I said, well, shouldn't we let the people in the complex all vote? And if anybody wants to come, you guys don't have to be here, I'll facilitate it. And they said no, and they shut it down, and they shut it down. And I I went behind their backs, and I knocked on all the doors in the complex and asked people what they thought about this. And a lot of people really liked the idea. So I scheduled it. Because we had that multi-purpose room, and I could use it whenever I wanted. Any person who lived there could use it, so I could have my own meeting. So I scheduled it, and then I went to the rest of the board. I go, do you have any idea how dumb you people are going to look if you're not there? And everyone was really mad, and we had 100% turnout. 100% turnout. Someone from every condo was there. And it was really cool. They actually tell you some really good ideas. Like if there's a major earthquake, what you're going to need to have beforehand, because when there's a catastrophic event, it's too late to get stuff. So I don't know what happened, but I took it very serious. I started taking, I was surprised I was the one that wanted to attend something like that. I was surprised I was the one who wanted to organize something like that. And I was surprised that I was the one that got all interested in it. And then I got a little weird. I also had, you know, very young children and a newborn. And the thought of having absolutely no water was really scary for some reason. The thought of having absolutely no water was really scary. And we had water delivered, so I had like 50 extra water bottles, you know, big bottles delivered. And then I stocked up the pantry where you could barely close any of the cupboard doors with canned stuff. And then I bolstered down everything in our condo. And then we started having these small earthquakes in another city in Santa Monica. They were having these little earthquakes. And I said, you know, we're going to have a major earthquake in 2 weeks. And I just started saying it, and people were like, you know, you really shouldn't run around saying that. I go, well, we are. Like, how do you know? And I go, I have no idea. We're going to. And I had a friend who had a baby the day I started saying that. And because I was their minister, I went and witnessed their baby being born. And I told them and their parents, we're going to have an earthquake in 2 weeks from today. We're going to have an earthquake in 2 weeks from today. You really, 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 really need to stock up on water. You really need to stock up on water. And everybody thought I was nuts. Everybody thought I was obnoxious. And, you know, including in my house, everyone thought I was nuts. And of course I felt a little strange at that point, but I had already crossed the line. 2 weeks to that day was Northridge earthquake. And we lived in Sherman Oaks, and we were the second hardest hit city from that earthquake. The mall across the street that we went to every single day at 4 o'clock in the afternoon was completely flattened. The earthquake happened at 4 in the morning. If it had happened at 4 in the afternoon, we would have gotten killed along with a lot of other people. The house next door to us collapsed completely. The people got killed. And we lost power, of course, but all the water mains broke. We did not have water for weeks and weeks after that. No one had water. Everyone in my condo complex came to me for water. I felt like, you know, the pig in the brick house. Because he's a brick, you know. And I was like, that was really cool. I'm Chicken Little, and I was right. And I just remember that morning, people lined up outside my door, knocking on my door to see if we were okay, and they never liked us. And someone had a generator, and they made coffee, and I got the first cup, and everyone was my friend all of a sudden. And I went, y'all being nice to me because you made fun of me, right? I'm like the pig in the brick house right now. And I said, I just want you to know, God told me, and I told you, and you all thought I was an idiot. I thought I was an idiot too, so I understand. And so, you know, shared the water, and it was a couple weeks before they finally opened a store to get some supplies. We needed every single thing that I had gotten. We needed every single thing that I'd gotten. I did not go overboard whatsoever. It was insane. It was insane. And then when the fire department came out to check our building, it was that guy, and he came up to me and he goes, did they all come to you for stuff? And I said, they certainly did, sir. And he goes, man, I could see it in their eyes. They thought you were an idiot. And I said, I saw it in your eyes. You were absolutely convinced there was going to be an earthquake. And he goes, yeah, but I heard you predicted it down to the day.